Thank you very much, sir. All right, apologies for absence. I have apologies for member Main, Xavier Main, member Mr. Robert Nestor Morgan, Minister Hill, and member Tova Hamilton. Any other apologies?
No, sir.
Minister, I believe member Crawford will be joining us late.
All right, noted. Noted. All right, so just in my opening remarks, today we will be taken through a clause-by-clause review by Ms. Kadeen Campbell, Senior Legal Officer at MSET, who is replacing who will lead us through today. For today's, we are going to go through today part 2 of the matrix, starting at section 10 to 21. And also we are going to resume the review on part 1 of the matrix, starting at section 22. That will be what we will do today. It is the recommendation that we would invite the OUR to appear at the next meeting to deliver its responses to certain recommendations the OUR forward. So we're putting that forward for your consideration and approval, that the OUR be taken as the sole agenda item for that meeting. And this will allow for the ministry to continue its collaboration with the Legal Reform Department to completion and to evaluate the OUR's presentation. Just by way of update, the last Joint Select Committee sitting of October 7th, 2021 concluded at section 21, the Renewable Energy and Parliamentary Matrix. The ministry, on the initiative of Permanent Secretary Carol Palmer, arranged a collaboration with the Legal Reform Department, which commenced on Monday, October 19th, to assess the sufficiency of the provisions of the Electricity Act 2015, independent and in consideration of the recommendations presented to the Joint Select Committee. This was an intent to settle the ministry's position on the amendments proposed and provide greater assistance to the committee with the required research and standards towards confirming provisions for improving the act of the electricity sector for the benefit of the public and, of course, other stakeholders. To date, the collaborative sessions with the LRD were held on October 19th, 20th, and 26th, and the next one is planned for Tuesday, November the 2nd, 2021. So the collaborative review has considered section 2 through 7 of the Act. However, the assessment of the Electricity Act is incomplete, and there is need for continuation with the LRD and the ministry, and by the ministry separately. Importantly, there is need for the technical research and standards and best practices in other jurisdictions to properly analyze the recommendations put forward and take into account any relevant matters of the operational efficiency of the Act to meet the objectives of closing any existing gaps and creating a stronger framework for energy efficiency and security in the electricity sector. So that is where we are with the ministry and the LRD. And therefore, that's why it's proposed that we take the OUR on the 28th of October. And that will allow, obviously, time for the ministry to continue its collaboration with the OUR and, of course, to be able to evaluate the OUR's presentation and clarifications to us on the after their presentation. So that is where we are in relation to the ministry's consultations. Any questions or clarifications needed on that?
The Minister, so is it that today we are going to receive, today being the 28th, we will be receiving reports from the OUR, updates on them, especially some outstanding questions that they were asked. Is that so?
Ms. Mack, my understanding is that we are going to go through the matrix. So I think the 20th is a typo. Please clarify for me that.
I'm not sure if you, so I wanted to clarify when you said it, if it's November, you're talking the next, we have 2 scheduled dates for November. Well, if members agree to those dates, but
yes, the 28th seems to be a typo. The dates for the OUR, the proposed dates for the OUR, for the schedule of the next meetings would be Thursday, November 11th, and Thursday, November 25th, both at 10 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
I suppose that OUR would present at the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the work for today is a continuation of the review of the matrix.
The matrix, that's correct. That's correct. OUR will be at the next meeting. They'll be presented at the next meeting to give us time to go through.
Through you, Chair, just to indicate that I had sent the responses from the OUR to allow for members to have sufficient time to go through. I received it yesterday evening.
And that has been passed on already?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Was that today or yesterday?
I sent it last evening with the minutes, and it's a PDF document that I attached to the email to everyone yesterday.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, great. All right, so can we do a review and confirmation of the minutes of September 29th and October 7th? We had agreed to defer the September 29th. I hope members would have been able to go through and see if there's any typos or any corrections or any in relation to those minutes of the 29th and October 7th. Member Paul, well, you're always a man who is very keen on the minutes, so I'll take your lead on that.
I'm very sorry. I don't think I was at the last meeting fully. I was in and out, so I am not competent.
All right, Ms. Allen, Janice, did you get a chance to
No, I haven't gone through. No, I haven't gone through, Minister. I'm sorry for that.
Would you like us to defer until the end of the meeting to give an opportunity to think, because there's 2 sets of minutes, so we don't want to just catch up on those. So if I could ask members to just run through them while we are
Okay, I'll
session. So we defer it until the close.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to ask now for Ms. Kadeen Campbell to take us through the matrix starting at section 10 to section 21, and then or either do that or start with the resume of the viewing of part 1 of the matrix starting at section 22. So over to you, Ms. Campbell. Not hearing you.
Oh, good morning, Minister. I'm sharing in a few minutes. Good morning, Chairman, committee members, and colleagues. Are you able to see the screen clearly?
Yes, I'm seeing it.
Great. Now we're going to section 10, as you indicated. Characteristics of, and section 10.
Excuse me, Ms. Campbell. I think this is the other section of the matrix that we had done before.
Okay, so it's part
That's
one.
part one, yes. So we're starting at part 2.
Part 2. Part 2 matrix, starting at section 10 to section 21.
I crave your indulgence for a few minutes, please.
Chairman, I use the opportunity just to apologize for my tardiness this morning. I was late coming from a hearing this morning.
No problem, Member Gordon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Do you have a copy of that matrix? I thank you for obliging. So now the relevant section is on screen. This is a recommendation from Jamaica Energy Partners, and they're requesting that the provision at section 10.4 of the Electricity Act, which requires the minister to include restrictions or conditions relating to activities authorized by, whether or not relating to activities authorized by the electricity license. So the minister is able to include restrictions or conditions as it appears to the minister to be necessary or expedient. And any such restriction or condition, the minister may make any decision relating to any restrictions or conditions to be imposed, the minister may make on recommendation from the OUR.
I'm trying to understand the recommendation. They believe that the section that deals with the minister's discretion should be further expanded to define what expediency, recommend that the expediency and restriction should be defined and not be left to discretion and subjectivity of them. So they want for a definition to be given to expediency. And did they propose any words?
They have not. I have not seen any proposal for the wording.
Well, I think they would have to be more specific than that. I think there is always need for ministerial discretion, and especially when such discretion is exercisable based on advice coming from the office, which is the OUR. I think in all matters affecting the licensing in relation to electricity, the minister can't act on his own just so. He at all times has to benefit from the consultation, from the recommendation from the OUR. So I am not clear that this one is justifiable. That's my view.
And if I may, I'm not clear also if all the circumstances can be defined definitively. So I am also in doubt without more.
Yes, you're correct. All the possible situations cannot really be covered in a definition. And so therefore there has to be some leverage, some leeway for a minister who acts on behalf of the people to exercise some discretion.
Chairman, through you, if I might, my reading of the recommendation is that the concern is about the singularity of the minister acting. And I agree with Member Paulwell that, you know, that is precisely why a minister is in place to make decisions in particular circumstances. But perhaps for the purpose of transparency, and I think responsive to the recommendation that is being made, section 10.4, where it speaks to which appears to the minister to be necessary or expedient, is then followed by, and he may request the office to make recommendations in this regard. That again suggesting that he can exercise the discretion to request those recommendations or not. I wonder if the language is not so much in the word expedient, but perhaps in the use of may as opposed to shall, because at the end of the day, he can request recommendations from the OUR. And if you say he ought to give some amount of objectivity to the final decision, those recommendations can be provided. The minister is not bound to follow them. They are recommendations. And so I'm understanding the concern. I'm wondering if it was really worded or expressed appropriately. I express no view either way at this point, but it may be may and not the question of the expedient that is the issue.
which brings me, Chairman, are you there? Because I've seen this as.
Go ahead, member.
Yes. Right. One of the features of this process that we're going on has been largely a reliance on committee members to treat with the recommendations, especially as if they were, experts in this area. They're not, those of us who are parliamentarians, apart from those who would have specific portfolio responsibility for energy, wouldn't be very au fait. So what I was hoping is that for each recommendation, we could get a clear position from the ministry. What is the view on the particular recommendation, and perhaps then to go into specific wording. But as it is here now, I don't think we're getting the kind of support and guidance that would be necessary and it will put people like me in a position to be hugging the show. I'm hoping that when we come back next time, we could have a column which says, and I suppose you were hinting at that earlier, which says what is the ministry's position on this, and put a greater onus on the ministry to explain some of these recommendations, especially if the ministry is in sync with them.
That sounds more than plausible and reasonable. You'll note that?
It is noted. The next.
Just through you, Chair, just to get an understanding, so we're deferring this recommendation for the next meeting. Deferring a decision on.
I would recommend that.
That's what I'm getting from member. That's what I'm getting from member Paul Webb, for which I have no issue with that.
And Minister, just to support what Member Powell has just said, and I think I may have said it before in another meeting, making a decision on the recommendations really would be better guided if we were clear on what the policy position of the ministry was in relation to each recommendation. And then committee members would be able to opine on the appropriateness of the recommendation or the policy, given prevailing circumstances.
Sure. Just a brief intervention. Let me just say that I support the position of Member Paulwell in relation to having some indication from the ministry in relation to whether their view on the recommendations. However, I will say for this recommendation, just in case I am unable to attend the other meeting where it is being considered, that this is not a recommendation that I would support. I think sometimes there is an urge to attempt to legislate for every circumstance and attempt to define every aspect, which is impractical, and there does call for discretion, especially at the level of the minister in a number of circumstances, because circumstances can be so divergent that I do not see why it would be worthwhile to further define the terms that are used that would in fact be given legal definitions in and of themselves. So I just wanted to put my position out there, Chair. But I support that the ministry should provide us with some guidance as to their view and how it falls into the policy framework of the ministry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, member. Noted. So we'll defer, continue.
Excuse me, Ms. Campbell. I think we should have started above that where you were. 10.4 wasn't the first recommendation. It started at 10.1, section 10.1, above that. Right.
10.1, my apologies. So may I draw your attention to section 10.1. So the recommendation here from Jamaica Energy Partners, and they're recommending the removal of the non-exclusive license for supply of electricity in accordance with section 10.1. The reasons for exclusivity, non-exclusivity, and the definition of each term is requested for clarity.
All right, again, I am not, Minister, can I speak?
Well, right, I remember.
Yes. I am not clear what we are dealing with here, because the license does provide for exclusivity in relation to transmission and distribution, and there is non-exclusivity in relation to generation. And forgive me, I don't have I'm trying to just pull up my copy of the act, but could the ministry just help me on this one? Why are they proposing these changes?
Well, the act at section 10.1 provides for the licenses that are issued subject to section 9. It provides for some licenses to be exclusive and others non-exclusive. I am not sure what is the basis for this recommendation, and from my own reading, I would not support the amendment requested.
Yeah. Yes, I'm with you there. I'm just making sure that I have the law in front of me, but I believe that the scheme of the legislation that we are reviewing anticipates that you're going to have a complex of licenses, recognizing the policy in relation to each. So the JPSCO, as the sole buyer, will have exclusivity in relation to the distribution and transmission of that which it purchases. But there are a number of private power suppliers who are generators, and we anticipate in the future that there will be others for which licenses, non-exclusive license, will be applicable. So I believe that if the thing isn't broken, and you don't need to tamper with it, especially because we anticipate that the exclusivity on transmission and distribution will continue, while the others, we have non-exclusivity, those will also continue. I can't see behind this recommendation any other reasoning that could force me to want to go along with it.
So we have the minister and member Paul well in concurrence. Any other members have any?
I come in for my paycheck month end.
Ms. Campbell, Mrs. Campbell, William Campbell, anybody else have any input on this? Or can we go with it?
I concur with the prevailing view, Chairman.
Is that Member Jackson?
Sure.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, so we have concurrence on that. You can proceed.
Sure. We move down to another recommendation for section 10. And if I may be allowed to read it, it's extensive. It says, based on the act, the sector is divided into 5 areas, namely generation, transmission, distribution, dispatch, and supply. Oh, I think they are either listed as exclusive or non-exclusive. It is a follow-on from the one above. So if I may move to 13.1.
I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell. I'm not, so you're saying that the section that you were just about to read, 10. Okay, sorry. So we went back to 10.1 and now we are going down back to 13. Okay.
Yes, I had skipped 10.1
right.
Inadvertently.
Is it possible to make your screen larger, because I have to read from your screen? If you could make it a little larger, I'd appreciate it. Wonderful.
Is that sufficient?
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure. Now we move to revocation or suspension on electricity license. This recommendation points us to section 13.1b. And it reads, subject to the provisions of this act, the minister may revoke an electricity license or suspend an electricity license for such period as he thinks fit, if he is satisfied that in relation to subparagraph B, the licensee has breached any of the terms or conditions of the electricity license and the period provided, if any, for remedying the breach has expired and the breach has not been remedied to the minister's satisfaction. So the concern here is that there needs to be a definition for the method of remedying a breach, and it is not left to the minister's satisfaction.
And again, if I could say, I see nothing wrong with this section. A breach can be remedied by correcting the breach. That is quite clear, but ultimately the minister must have that discretion in the event that the breach has not been remedied to revoke the license. I think it's a good provision and we should maintain it.
I agree. Fine.
Sounds straightforward to me.
These are recommendations from Jamaica Energy Partners, correct?
Correct.
So is it that, okay, so it's one thing to say, I believe, well, while I'm not suggesting that we should change the definition, but in a case like this, is it that I'm not seeing below, is it that they're proposing a definition? Is that the definition? Or they're just saying it's too big and too open?
Yes.
Okay, I see. Okay.
And and probably we should have ensured that this took place, but where people are making recommendations for changes, they need to put forward the language
I
that they're
agree.
speaking, because as it is now, I see nothing wrong with this wording at all.
I agree with Member Powell. If there's going to be a recommendation for a change, there ought to be at least a suggestion as to what that change should be. Then we can look at it in relation to what currently exists. In this case, we are not, well, I'm not suggesting that we should make a change, but going forward, maybe.
So we agree that it remain as is.
Yes.
Sorry, just for clarity, section 13(1)D also, Ms. Campbell, I'm not sure if you read that one. That says the section is too vague, which is a different subsection.
No, I have not read 13(1)D as yet. In relation to section 13(1)D, which empowers the minister to revoke or suspend an electricity license for such period as he thinks fit, if he is satisfied that this is required in the public interest of Jamaica. The concern is that the section is too vague and open to abuse.
I don't agree.
My colleagues from the AGC or LRD could assist here. I think public interest might be defined somewhere in law.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
hi, let me.
Who
Right,
is that?
the term. This is Marlene Aldred. I was just trying to turn on the camera. Marlene Aldred, Chair, if I may. Just to say that the term public interest isn't really a defined term, but there's case law surrounding how it is to be interpreted. So if the issue is relating to the use of the term public interest, I wouldn't agree that it's open to abuse or vague, because it's a...
I don't have a license under the Act, and I am a self-generator, because the Act really, in reading it, does not require me to have a license. It says at 18(1), a self-generator shall develop and maintain a system of electricity generation. And then B, so that was 1A. 1B says, if the self-generator holds an electricity license, so you as a self-generator can operate quite legally according to A, without the need of a license. B, if you get a license and the circumstances under which a license is warranted is when you are seeking to benefit from the net billing arrangement. So you are actually selling to the JPSCO your additional capacity. I'm a self-generator now, and I don't sell any excess capacity to JPSCO, so I don't need to have a license. So we have to make that absolutely clear. That is what obtains now. So I'm not too sure if the recommendation from WICTA has to do with those persons who sell their excess capacity to the JPSCO, whether or not they shouldn't require a license. I know why it was put in place in the first place. It's really to monitor, to ensure that people are in fact abiding by the code, and that especially those who are interconnecting to the JPSCO's system, that they are properly certified, and the licensing process enables that. I do agree that, sorry?
No, go ahead. I was
Right.
trying to clarify what you were saying about the recommendation from Wington. It says here that where such generation is solely for their use, therefore it's not for the net billing person. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the person who is selling back. So
But
what
I
you're
don't
saying
need
is
a
kind
license.
of confirming that.
Yes, but I don't need a license as a self-generator who
Yes,
is not selling
but
to the grid.
but remember, they are speaking to 18.1b, which says if the generator holds a license, and that's why I spoke about the net billing requirements, because they're speaking specifically to the one where they hold a license, not the instance where they don't hold a license.
But it says where such generation is solely for their own use and export to the grid is blocked. Yes, that person doesn't need a license. I'm not too sure what they're seeking to cure, because I don't need a license. What I do know is that the government has been concerned about data collection. So for example, the government doesn't know today how many persons exist like me who put up my system, generating for myself, don't need a license because I don't intend to sell to the JPSCO. And also, I do attach myself to the system in that when I don't have electricity, there's a switch that goes straight back into JPS. And I think the concern is how to ensure that there is safety in the mechanism that is established, and also how to determine how many people in Jamaica has moved off the grid for this reason, or has established their own facility, however limited it might be. And I am suggesting that what you probably need to insert is just a requirement for the GEI to certify that the system is in fact compatible, that it is properly installed. But I don't think there is a need to trouble the licensing regime that exists now.
The point you made, Member Paul, about the government not knowing the extent of the persons like yourself needs to be captured somewhere, because that's important.
And it can be captured just by a requirement, just as when you wire your house and you have to get it certified that the house is properly wired. When you put in a system to self-generate, I think it is in the public interest that that system be properly established. And so there could be a requirement, not for licensing, but for that system to receive certification from the GEI. And by that doing, you can collect data as to how many systems are established, what is the capacity, and so that government can engage in even better planning.
Agreed. Note that for me, please.
Noted.
Right.
So what is our position on this matter? I'm not sure it was clear.
I'm so sorry. What I'm suggesting is that the
No, so
provision,
continue.
I'm suggesting that the provision be maintained, that government should have some requirement for persons who establish their own generating units to have it certified. And by that requirement, you can capture the data that you need to in your planning. But there should be no requirement for licensing.
Okay, I heard noted, but I wasn't sure if we were accepting it. That's why I was just asking.
Thank you, Member Allen. Continue.
We move now to the next recommendation, section, which relates to section 28 of subsection 8 of the Act. And this is a recommendation from Jamaica Energy Partners. And their concern is that section 20, subsection 8 seems to conflict with section 20, subsection 5, which states that the right of first refusal of the single buyer shall not be extended to any subsidiary company of the single buyer. So what I just read was section 20, subsection 5 of the Act. Now section 20, subsection 8, I will read for the benefit of the committee. And it relates to the right of first refusal under the Act to the single buyer. It says the arrangement referred to in subsection 3, and subsection 3 states that the single buyer may not place existing generation capacity otherwise than in accordance with the right of first refusal and such protocols and rules as the generation procurement entity may establish. I'll read section 20, subsection 8. The arrangements referred to in subsection 3 may, if approved by the generation procurement entity, permit the replacement of the generation capacity through a subsidiary of the single buyer, provided that the legal and commercial terms and conditions of the power purchase agreement and other arrangements between the single buyer and the subsidiary shall be subject to the approval of the generation procurement entity.
If I could.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, Minister, this issue of the right of first refusal has been a major policy issue that has confronted this committee from day one. And I think that once a position is taken on this matter, then there would be consequential amendments. But I don't think we are at that point as yet. So I would beg that this entire issue be deferred, especially until we hear back from the ministry's own position, because then that would affect how this section is formulated going forward.
Agreed. Silence consent.
Section 20, and that section deals with, in part, procurement of new generating capacity. This is a comment from, a recommendation rather, from Wigton Wind Farm Limited. And in relation to section 20, they are of the view that the act should reasonably provide for the viability and business continuity of IPPs that generate a certain level of electricity to the grid and allow for them to, at a minimum, maintain the same capacity, interconnection, and location by replacing existing energy generation subject to further conditions. Ms. Tolo, I will ask for your assistance with the ministry's comment on this one.
Based on my reading of this and the documentation that came along with it, I think they are saying that this is almost speaking to a ROFA type arrangement, a right of first refusal type arrangement in terms of maintaining the same capacity, interconnection, and location at the time of replacement. So the IPPs here, I think Wigton is saying that they should have a right of first refusal for business continuity. That's my reading of it.
You're correct, and you can envisage and assume that everybody who is now on the system, all the IPPs would want to have their own right of first refusal, so that when the 20-year license expires, they are seeking to have that renewed with the same capacity or updated technology, as the case may be. If we're saying that we are going to have a fundamental debate and discussion on this issue of right of first refusal, then I think we should also defer this matter until that time.
Members, accepted?
Yes.
Agreed, Minister.
So the next comment in this order is also relates to the right of first refusal in relation to the third schedule, and in light of the immediate discussions, should this also be deferred through the chair to be dealt
So the
with the other right of first refusal?
The recommendation, Chairman, is that this item is going to be a most crucial matter for us to determine, and it is best that the ministry comes to us with its position. At that time, it will be more appropriate for us to have that debate and further discussion.
Accepted.
Very well, this is also deferred.
Excuse me, Ms. Campbell, I'm thinking we could go to part 1 of the matrix now. Section 22.
22. Section 22 deals with duties of transmission, distribution, and supply licensees. The first comment here is from the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. So their observation query is in relation to section 22(1), which speaks to the duties of transmission licensees, distribution licensee, and supply licensee. They're saying that these references suggest that the Act acknowledges the need for segregation of the various functions of getting electrical power to the end user. However, the Act fails to make it mandatory that these licensees are separate, and therefore the current license to the single buyer gives then the exclusive right to carry out these functions, again missing the opportunity for increased competitiveness and efficiency in the process. There is also the potential conflict with the self-generator and wheeler concept if none of these persons can be a transmitter or distributor or supplier, as they are not the single buyer.
Okay, the silence is
No, not in this case.
where you need
So,
where you need to
think,
advise.
right, I think sometimes because don't fully appreciate scheme, which is a scheme that follows policy. And the law now clearly establishes the distinction between a generator, transmission and distribution, and activities surrounding that. And I am not sure I'm seeing a mischief in the existing provisions that the fact is that transmission and distribution by policy is going to be an exclusive arrangement to the JPSCO. And that is not changeable, certainly not in the foreseeable future. And those who are suppliers are able to supply to the JPSCO in an orderly manner based on the licensing regime that currently exists, which to me has certainly worked well in the 5-year period since the law has been established. So I know that there are some outstanding issues. So for example, wheeling, which should have happened years ago, that has not yet happened. Because I do not believe that there is sufficient will on the part of the OUR, nor cooperation on the part of the JPSCO to get this thing done. But you're not going to be able to enable wheeling by circumvent the rules that exist in relation to transmission and distribution, because that is really a JPSCO function and they own the grid. So you're not going to be able to get around that. What you need is a regulator to promulgate the rules governing wheeling, as was done with net billing, and get on with it. But I don't think you can, by this legislation, do what the private sector is seeking to do. I think the law is quite clearly established in terms of the various functions and definitions of licensees. So I would not accept the recommendation here.
Any comments from another member? Okay, Minister Paulwell, Member Paulwell, you know that.
Thank you.
So the OUR has a comment on section 22, subsection 2. It says that because the definition in the Act, the definition of the word supply in the Act, the reference to electricity supplied by it or by any other person to consumer is superfluous. That is, supply means activities involved in the sale of electricity to consumers. Also, the use of supply in this context somewhat excludes transmission and distribution licensees who do not supply electricity, when it appears the intention was for the provision to apply to them as well as supply licensees. The key focus should be the impact that some act or omission of the licensee has on the security or stability of the system. They have offered words for the amendment suggested.
Directly impacts what they believe about themselves. That was a special parenting message brought to you by the National Family Planning Board, 5 Sylvan Avenue, Kingston 5.
Jamaica, home of the resilient, passionate and hard-working. A people and a nation who have achieved and defied all odds, working to keep their economy growing, their country thriving, from investments made in innovative opportunities and exports demanded globally. We have a vision, now within our grasp, where Jamaica becomes the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. We will not let go of this vision. We will grow. We will overcome these challenging times and look to the future with hope and positivity. These are special times. The world as we know it has changed, but home will always be in our hearts. And in Jamaica, you can always find a home. Think you know Jamaica? Look again. You will be surprised.
No one is immune to mental illness. Your age, race, gender, social class, or economic status is no match for addictive behaviors, anxiety or eating disorders, depression or schizophrenia. What is having a good social support system. As the saying goes, in times of test, family is best. Unfortunately, many are denied the benefit of the support of family and friends because of stigma and an oppressive silence around mental illness. Let's put an end to the silence.
Speak up. Speak now.
End the stigma.
Share your story.
End the stigma.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Whenever you hear the following tone, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, will be giving information on an emergency situation affecting the island. Please be on the alert and listen to your radio and television for further information. This was a test of the Emergency Alert System, brought to you by ODPEM.
It is very unusual to get COVID after you take the vaccine. But of course, if you've only taken your first dose and you're within 2 to 4 weeks, then your body has not responded fully to the vaccine dose yet. And if you're exposed to COVID, you could get it. Once you get both doses of the vaccine, then you are certainly protected against severe COVID. Very few persons may get infected or mild symptoms, but most people will not get severe COVID, will not need to go to hospital, and they will not die from COVID.
Coding and programming share the same language. So I got more interested because of programming, because a couple of years ago I did wanted to do programming at VTDI.
Yo, this is we're committed to reducing the impact of disasters occurring in Jamaica. We're ever ready to assist you before, during, and after a disaster. But everybody have a role to play, so make we work together and follow the plan. Whether rich or poor or where you come from, hurricanes affect everyone, so be prepared. Prevention is better than cure. Be prepared. Listen to ADPEM. A message from the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Our children have been out of school for a year and a half. The impact on their education is significant and it will be long-lasting. As a responsible government, we cannot place the education of your children, our children, at risk. There is a ray of hope, and that hope comes in the form of the vaccine.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
A major area in high school for me was IT and EDPM. I did that for 2 years, and from then I realized that there was a drive for more of technology. So I decided to take this step.
Connected or related devices, one or more of which, pursuant to a program, performs automatic processing of data. Wouldn't that capture a smart meter?
I think that's what they're saying, but it's not. But they are also suggesting that consideration should also be given to expressly include it. But based on the definition that you've just read, Member Golding Campbell, that's the definition of a computer, which a smart meter is. But there seems to be a concern.
1 second, Senator Allen, and it goes on to say, because there's an and, sorry,
okay.
And includes any data storage facility or electronic communication system directly connected or operating in conjunction with such device or group of such interconnected or related devices. I mean, it would seem to me that it is already included, and there is a provision at paragraph B that allows the minister to exclude devices by order. So it's an inclusive definition.
I get you.
It seems to me it's already covered.
Right. It would have to be excluded, but it's already included based on that definition.
Yeah.
But maybe they're looking for the expressly stated, from their point of view.
But it is not worded expressly state anything. It is worded to include everything, but expressly exclude by order of the minister.
Okay, right. So there wouldn't be any need for that there. Okay.
SG, am I out to lunch, or is that your reading of that provision?
I agree with you, Senator Golden Campbell. Chair, if I may, the only caution I would say is that the Cybercrimes Act, as was stated earlier, is being reviewed. So we're not sure what, if any, change may be made to definitions and other provisions. So that's the only caution I would alert you to.
Or perhaps if JPS hasn't made a submission on the Cybercrimes Act, we could just alert that committee to this recommendation that appeared for us in case it's helpful for them to consider.
Well, I can do that, Senator Golden Campbell, because I'm also assisting that Joint Select Committee.
Okay, thank you, SG.
Okay. Right. Chair, we can move on to section 29.
No, I don't think so. They had another statement there. Didn't they?
Hold on, I thought they were interconnected.
Oh, okay. Specifically designate electricity infrastructure to be critical infrastructure and to modify the appropriate criminal sanctions.
I suppose this is also a reference to the Cybercrimes Act.
I just want to be clear what is being recommended by them there in that section.
I'm wondering if it's a reference to the Cybercrime Act.
And I think we want
I'm not sure.
Is there anyone else looking at that? I mean, I know Senator Golden Campbell's eagle eyes. I don't know if you saw that section below the cybercrimes reference, which speaks to, with the current revision of the act, the government specifically designate the electricity infrastructure to be critical infrastructure and to modify the appropriate criminal sanctions for under the act to include interference, et cetera, et cetera.
I think we probably want a reference on that.
And this is one that I would support.
That seems to be a significant policy position to designate the electricity infrastructure. And what would be defined by infrastructure that would not be captured by cybercrimes in relation to computer definitions or I mean, my question would be, what are they calling infrastructure? One. Two, I would want to know, I'm not aware of us putting into legislation provisions like this, that something is critical infrastructure that attracts criminal penalty in this way. I mean, what is critical?
Well, I think I could offer a comment because in this day and age, electricity supply is a most crucial, critical infrastructure, the tampering of which could create irreparable damage to an economy. And it is conceivable that through cybercrime activity, you can have a total shutdown of the entire country. And what I'm hearing the JPSCO to be saying that notwithstanding provisions in the cybercrimes law, that they would like to see under this criminal provision, criminal sanctions under the Electricity Act, clear provisions be provided against such activities. And in fact, for the infrastructure, which is basically your generating plants, your transmission, your grid, that entire grid could come to nothing by some computer hacker, some way getting into the JPSCO system and shut you down. That to me is a massive critical issue that could put the country on its knees. You wouldn't be able to accommodate flights in and out of Jamaica. People would start feeling the effects immediately in this day and age of technology. So I would support strongly worded provisions also in the electricity law to signal the importance of this infrastructure, and that tampering with it by people who are hackers, for example, won't be tolerated, and the penalties ought to be very, very severe. I think the US is in the same thinking, if not there already.
Remember, Paul, the concept of somebody hacking into the GPS system and causing that kind of damage is covered under the cyber crimes when it comes to unauthorized, the provisions on unauthorized access to a system. And the penalty for the penalty is 5 to 7 years, depending on whether damage is caused, if they are prosecuted in the Supreme Court. So my difficulty is that I certainly support strong penalties in relation to that kind of illegal activity, but I'm concerned that if we have something set out in law, in one sense, unless we are going to exempt the electrical infrastructure from the Cyber Crimes Act, if we already have it set out there as a criminal penalty, I'm concerned about duplicating it and possibly creating confusion, which is not to say that, you know, you can't charge under one act versus under another, but I don't know, I'd be guided by the SG on the matter.
And I appreciate
I think the penalties are covered.
the struggle. Yeah, I appreciate the struggle that you have. I find though that when you're dealing with specific legislation like this, even if you're duplicating word for word, to give it a total framework, it is, for me, I find to embrace these provisions into a specific legislation won't hurt. It might very well help to have all the bodies of rules within one statute, even if it is a complete duplication, but it is also to signal the importance of the electricity infrastructure.
Remember, Paul, if I hack into JPS and I'm caught, I would then be prosecuted under cyber crimes and subject to a 5 to 7 year penalty, as well as under the Electricity Act. So I may very well end up being convicted for a period of 10 to 14 years. Is that, I mean, I'm not saying
No.
that is unwanted.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
Yes.
understand.
Yes, well, you have to forgive my limited criminal exposure at the bar, but my view is this law, and it was the first time we were establishing major penalties for electricity theft, interference with the electricity supply. And I just believe for consistency, and it doesn't mean that you are going to be able to prosecute under two different statutes, especially because the provisions are pretty much identical. I just believe that when you're dealing with a specific sector, it is always better to have all the rules governing that sector, including the criminal rules, be under one statute. And even if you will find duplication, and we have myriads of duplications of legislation overlapping with others, as long as they are consistent, then there's nothing wrong, I believe, in having those provisions in this body of law.
Chairman?
Excuse me, Chair, Member Jackson and SG have their hands raised.
Go ahead, Member Jackson and then SG.
Chairman, I hear the point made by Member Golden, which I can appreciate. I have a suggestion, if it could work. Why don't we put in this act a reference to the, make applicable the provision on the Cybercrime Act for these breaches. So you do not replicate a criminal provision in this act, but you immediately point to the breach in the Cybercrime Act that would apply where you have the offense committed on the JPS system.
SG, you can give us some advice on that?
Thank you, Chair. That actually is more in the remit of the Office of the Parliamentary Counsel. I have to say my preference, and I hear all the points, and to be honest, all are valid. My personal preference is not for the duplication, but I really think that falls more within the remit of Office of the Parliamentary Counsel. I had a slightly different point to make on the same issue. In reading it, I'm wondering if it is possible for that latter part to contemplate tampering vandalism, which may not be of a cybercrime nature. And it could be that these are still things that could be inserted in the Electricity Act, but not dealing with, say, a computer, cyber related. And I'm wondering if perhaps that is something that has been considered, because it could be that there is a gap in the Act from that perspective.
I think they made advocacy in relation to that too. They did. But isn't that the suggestion that is applicable? Isn't that what they're trying to achieve by the recommendation for the inclusion in section 28 of interferes with or damages?
Right. So I'm thinking that there could possibly really be an amendment to section 28 that may not overlap with the Cybercrimes Act. Meaning as it relates to other types of interference that are not cyber related, not computer related, which I think should really be considered, because I think that would be a bit of a gap if it's not included.
But their proposal, SG, their proposal, which I think we all agreed with, would cover the non-computer type damage. So if we agree that amendment, if the committee is agreeing that amendment, then that covers it. And then the cybercrime offenses in relation to the electricity infrastructure will be covered under the Cybercrimes Act. I'd be guided, as you indicated, by CPC as to whether that's a reference to the Cybercrimes Act or whether it's just completely unnecessary. And the other final comment on that would be whether or not this is a, is it that the JPS is uncomfortable with the penalties on the cybercrimes, i.e. feel that they're insufficient?
Hello.
Good morning. Does everyone hear me?
Yeah, hearing you.
Okay, I'm going to turn on my camera. One moment. Take off this mask. Good morning again. Having had the benefit of the discussion, there are a number of issues that come to mind. First of all, of course, as we know, you can have factual circumstances which may potentially provide grounds for criminal prosecution under separate acts or separate sections within an act. And SG, if I'm guided, usually the Director of Public Prosecutions or Crown Counsel in the parish court would, of course, and the police, you assess the actus reus of the crime and the mens reus of the crime, and then determine the circumstances, which is the most appropriate offense with which to charge the accused. Now, separate and apart from that, you can have an enactment in a penalty or an offense as conceived in the Cybercrimes Act, and it doesn't necessarily preclude you from creating an offense that does overlap. But of course, usually there is some policy justification in that there are elements that of the offense that are not captured in, say, for example, the general cybercrimes provision, that are then captured in the offense that is specific to a particular legislation like electricity. So one of the things that struck me as we were going through the recommendation was the use of the phrase critical infrastructure. And I don't know if something that the members of the committee may wish to consider is whether that contemplates a threshold of damage. In other words, in the context of cybercrimes, perhaps I am, a novice hacker and I hack into the grid, or I somehow interfere with the functioning of a smart meter, and it's detected by the electricity provider, but the impact on the grid, on the supply of electricity, is not significant, but it could still constitute an offense under the Cybercrimes Act. But suppose my hacking activity shuts down the electricity supply in Kingston and St. Andrew for 3 days. So I think those kinds of considerations in terms of the elements of an offense may be something that the members of the committee may wish to consider. And that would of course, be reflected in the types of penalties that you may wish to recommend for such an offense. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I addressed all the concerns that were raised and directed to Parliamentary Council.
Yes, I think you have, and probably you might want to reflect a little bit and come back with your own specific recommendation that might assist us. But I am with you that you have in the JPSCO an infrastructure that is critical, but you can have varying degrees of affectation based on cyber activities. And I agree that if the activity results in tremendous damage, in the likes of which you have hinted to, then that should require specific treatment under this law.
What is for sure is that we have got to make the fine and the time meet the crime, because that's a serious matter. As you said, Member Paul, has serious implications.
Yes. And I'm wondering, Chairman, if this might be a convenient time.
I think so. Kadeen, everything is, we have completed everything except the deferred for the OUR matters.
Deferred, we have up to section up to section 50, up to section 60 we have comments on, and we're now at 29, well 28 going to 29.
So we'll start back from here after the OUR presentation at one of the dates, either the 11th or the 25th. Is that so?
Yes.
I don't know.
Are we dedicating the November 11th specifically and solely to the OUR for that particular sitting? That was what was suggested. Is that accepted? And then therefore we get back to the matrix there at the meeting thereafter?
Yes, that's them.
Yes.
All right. So with that said, can we just go back to item 5, which is a confirmation of the minutes of September 29th and October 7th? Now that we have more members who were present at both.
Yes, I was at the September 29 meeting, so I can move for those minutes to be confirmed.
Can I have a second for the 29th?
I second, Janice.
All right.
Sorry.
All right, and for October 7th, can I have a confirmation and a second for those?
So moved, Chair.
That's Member Golden Campbell, seconded by?
Allen.
Member Allen, thank you very much. So we are at AOB.
Pardon me, sir. Just to clarify, based on what was said earlier about the OUR commenting on the sections that they've proposed, that would be in addition to the responses they provided to comments by the committee, yes? Just so I can.
That's correct. So so they will be notified of that in terms of the additional for them to respond on the 11th.
Okay.
All right. So members, it's 12:04. So we'll adjourn to the Thursday, November 11th, 2021 at 10 a.m. and then Thursday, November 25th, 2021 at 10 a.m. Are they accepted? Those dates accepted?
Yes, Minister.
Okay.
It was on the 11th, it's 10 a.m. as well.
Both are 10 a.m.
Okay.
I thank you, members, for your participation, Member Paulwell especially. And we look forward to seeing you on November 11th. Until then, stay safe.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.